And President Obama getting slammed by Reverend Jesse Jackson. Reverend Jackson accusing the president of putting illegal immigrant children before our own American children. Reverend Jackson saying the billions of dollars President Obama wants for the immigrants would be better spent combating violence in U.S. cities like Chicago. And he's not the only one.
Now billions of dollars want to be borrowed from the White House to help feed and house them. What about the goddamn kids here, in our neighborhood, in our country?
And Reverend Jesse Jackson joins us. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Greta, let me say quickly, I think getting support to those children in humanitarian crisis is the morally right thing to do. The remedy and the resources are very important. I think even Glenn Beck sending food and water and clothing is the right thing. But there's also a crisis in Chicago. It's not either, it's both and. We cannot turn our backs on those children there. Not here in Inglewood, where 1,000 have been shot this year, 200 killed, several thousand in the last few years. To me, we need a comprehensive plan here at home as well.
All right, two questions on that. One is the obvious problem is that whatever amount of money, it's finite, that we have to fix any of these problems. I mean, we always have to make very ugly decisions. You know, what do we do with the limited amount of resources we don't have or we have to borrow? That's the first question I have is how would you divvy that up? The second question is, has President Obama been to these areas in Chicago where these problems are happening so that he's got his attention on it?
Well, it's the area where he was the organizer in, but let me say we have a crisis here of guns being trafficked in, and drugs being trafficked in, and the police are overwhelmed. We need the FBI to stop the federal violation of the drugs in, guns in, and then, of course, his jobs out. Here we have a crisis, Greta, with even more children, where 50 schools have been closed, 50 drugstores closed, 72 grocery stores have been closed without a trauma unit. Several thousand have been killed in the last few years. So we have a crisis at home, and maybe it mirrors much of what's happening in rather abandoned urban America. I don't think it's time to slam anybody. We could not turn our back on the children on the border, not the children in Inglewood and Lawndale and Roseland and Austin as well.
All right, but okay, it's a crisis on the border. Everyone's talking about it, and, you know, there's no question it's making headlines and every news show and stuff. The crisis in urban America, most directly the crisis in Chicago. Exactly what has this administration done to say that acknowledge the crisis exists and the president has any attention on whether it be Chicago, Detroit, or any other city?
Well, I can tell you this, in Chicago, on the south and west side of Chicago, unemployment is 3 times the national average. We vacated 80,000 abandoned and vacant homes because the banks ripped us off. The banks got bailed out. The people got left
Reverend,
out.
You and I are on the same pages. I know it's terrible in Chicago. I know it's terrible in Detroit. What I'm trying to figure out is, while all the attention by this administration is currently on this crisis on our border, and I think it is a crisis and one we should be paying attention to, has the other crisis been neglected? The urban crisis been neglected by President Obama, and specifically Chicago, which is his home city?
I think he left a lot of it to the mayor, but it's bigger than that. And I think it's time for a White House conference on urban policy. HUD should be here because of the housing. When you close public housing and foreclose private housing, you have 20,000 homeless children in our school system here in Chicago. The issue of health and human services. That many people killed, you have a level of trauma and fear here. So you convene HUD and HHS and labor and let Chicago be a model for reconstruction. And right now we need such a...
But you say right now we need this. This has been going on for years. Why hasn't the president done something about this? I mean, it makes me crazy how much waste there is in this town of Washington. Well, there's a real need in a lot of these cities like Chicago. But what exactly has this administration done to try to help your problem? It's not just show up yesterday or today. It's been going on.
Well, while there is a crisis, on the other hand, there are more people working now than were working 7 years ago, 6 years ago. There are more people who have health care now than had it then, but it's not enough. Because this is not a crisis, this is a pattern. Last 10 years, about 4,000 have been killed, 1,000 injured by gunshot. We don't make guns in Chicago. Guns are made in Barrington and downstate Illinois, so guns in, drugs in, and jobs out. 90,000 lost to the NAFTA zone. And because it is so much bigger than the mayor's domain, or even what the governor can do, I contend we need some federal intervention. And that this is time for emergency investment in jobs now in this city for these children. We need more coaches and more teachers, not more police necessarily.
Well, you're a lot nicer about it than I am, because I'm actually outraged that this administration has absolutely ignored the inner cities, and we've seen a great city like Detroit, and I realize they've got responsibility. Detroit's, sunk their own ship, and I realize Chicago too. But there have been so many backs turned on so many of these urban areas, and it's just a tragedy. But I'm taking the last word on that. Reverend, always nice to see you, sir.
Thank you.